All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Evan Welchel. I am the VP of Revenue Marketing here at GitLab, and this is the Revenue Marketing Group Conversation. Today, we're going to focus on a strategy iteration around the account-centric motion that we've been executing to for the past couple quarters. You'll hear from various members of my team, myself, Emily Lures, Leslie Blanchard, and Hannah Woodward on different pieces of the puzzle here. I will apologize ahead of time. I probably should have done a video to make this more clear. To me, the presentation was clear, but I've been living it for the past couple of weeks. So I think I'd like to start with just a quick recap of what we're trying to present here and the message we're trying to convey. And then we'll just dive into questions because I already see we've got several on the dock. So the idea behind the slides was highlighting an iteration of the strategy that we've been doing for the past couple of quarters in marketing towards the GitLab 4300 large focus account list, and then the GitLab mid-market 4000 large focus account list. What we've realized through execution is that we actually are progressing accounts and getting account engagement with this focus, but we're probably not casting a wide enough net when it comes to first order. We did not have the ability to measure a lot of what you're seeing in the presentation and execute a lot of what you're seeing in the slides in the past because we use a platform called Demandbase for a lot of this. Demandbase launched an entirely new platform called Demandbase One that gives us a lot of these capabilities. It also is something that we'll be able to use for collaboration amongst sales, marketing, and a bunch of other teams as well. All new features and functionalities. We've been working on that implementation for the past couple months, getting the data in our data warehouse, getting teams enabled, et cetera. So effectively, we're looking at casting a wider net and then being very data-driven in the accounts we're trying to engage. So there's highlights in the presentation of the workflow. There's new pieces of the workflow. For example, we didn't have associate SDRs before building target lists where we had engaged accounts, but not prospects. We can now see where an account is engaging with us, but we don't have leads or contacts in Salesforce. So we're going to be triggering different workflows within the SDR organization where those audiences are created, and we're driving to top of funnel motions to help offset, or not offset, but increase our database size, but also try to find the prospects within those accounts that are engaging with us today. So that's a really high level synopsis of the motion, but the idea is really to open up the marketing funnel more so, collaborate more, and create clean lines with our top of funnel motions on the demand gen team, and then really be a little bit more middle of funnel, which is what we were trying to do in the past with field marketing, the ABS program, and then the SDR team is really middle of funnel and bottom of funnel as well. So that's the synopsis. Not going to present or anything like that, but let's dive into the questions and we'll see if we can help clarify and make this more clear.
Cool. I've got the first one, so I'll jump in. On slide 5, you mentioned 4 gaps, which was helpful, and I was just not totally sure how those lined up with the plans and the motions you detailed in the following slides. So maybe could you help me connect the dots on those 4?
Yep. So from the Tofu perspective, right, Dunk can speak to this too. We tried an account focus to the 4300 list with top of funnel activities. It wasn't terribly productive. So the idea is we widen that scope, right? So later in the slides, you'll see the TAM goes from the GL 4300 to really 17,000 to 19,000 accounts. And we can open up sort of those top of funnel tactics to those accounts. So it was a little bit about narrow focus and then the motions we were trying to do to that narrow focus. It just wasn't yielding results. I don't know, Dunk, do you want to add anything to that, or pretty good synopsis?
I think that was good. Thank you.
Cool. The lack of focus on accounts are raising their hands. That is, if you look in, and I did link in here to the GTM strategy in the handbook, we had different components, right? So we had account centric, we had account based, and then we had volume. Volume was where we were not targeting demand-based digital ads. It's not where we were focusing on field marketing. We have a small percentage of field marketing focus on volume accounts. Those were the hand raisers. That's where we were seeing a lot of the traction. That's where we were seeing a lot of the opportunities come from, was from that volume perspective. So we may not have necessarily had the right focus accounts in the list. And so we're looking at now, how do we engage those volume accounts and go to the people who are actually engaged and raising their hands today. That was the second piece. The sales priority piece, again, is, an alignment to more of the first order strategy. We were looking at sales nominated accounts. We were, there was different lists. There was a little bit of confusion. We're trying to make that a little bit more clear, a little bit more succinct of here's where we are focused from an account-based strategy and account-centric strategy as well. The list will be more dynamic now. It'll also be a little bit bigger, but it's pointed directly at those first order accounts today. Versus in the past, there was a lot of nomination and they weren't necessarily the accounts that were showing intent, that sort of thing. So we're still going to attempt to engage the accounts that aren't showing the intent, but we want to maximize the ones that are. So that's a big piece of it. And that's a big piece of the shift on how we're doing the targeting. And then the last piece is the lack of customer marketing, right? So I think anyone here who's heard me talk in the past couple of months has heard me say, when we convert a first order opportunity, that changes the entire corporate hierarchy, which means someone can go from one member of a group of subsidiaries of 15 accounts, all 15 accounts become customers if we close one. We're looking at, and we're running a test, which is highlighted on one of the slides, of when a first order closes, we're going to go after all these subsidiaries for connected new and see if we can't maximize the customer marketing aspect of it. It's the first iteration of the test. And then we want to continue to invest in growing out the customer marketing capabilities because we're not doing a lot of it today. We're typically focused on first order marketing only. And I think that's an area of growth that we can address with this test and then iterate from there. That was a lot of words. Thank you for that question, though.
You're welcome. Mike has a follow-up above, and it's probably good for everybody, asking what is tofu?
Top of funnel. Tofu is top of funnel. Mofu is middle of funnel. Apologies for the acronyms. I probably should have written that out.
And Bofu is bottom funnel.
That's right.
Cool. I've got the next one also. So on slide 7, I love the account journey funnel. I think this might be the first time I've seen this. And it made me wonder how product analytics might help. I don't know if it's PQLs or some kind of signal that somebody's doing a behavior in the app that signals buying intent. Curious what your vision is there.
So this is iteration 1, right? Iteration 2 is absolutely, we are interested in incorporating that into the funnel, right? When you look at what we're doing today, and Duncan and I were talking about this last week, things like namespaces would actually help us, right? Things like alliance partner data would help us to understand, okay, these accounts are engaged, but what are they actually doing today? So being able to pull that data in and enhance what we're already seeing go through the funnel, I think is going to help us tremendously, right? It'll just help us become more focused and more efficient. When you look at, because you could have a situation where there's someone, account engagement with thousands of minutes, and we don't know what they're doing. So we'd love to narrow that focus. We can go after multiple prospects within that account, but we don't necessarily know who's doing what behavior. So anything we can do to enhance that and narrow the focus is going to be very important for us. We're going to be casting initially a fairly wide net within an account.
Just to add on the journey stages as well, like we control that, so we can actually modify, what the qualifications are from moving through each of the journeys. This is kind of the first iteration of, we want to know if there's engagement. We want to know if there's anonymous engagement, so then we can kick off a workflow for the SDRs to find the likely people that are showing that engagement. But demand-based will we can design these as good as the data that we have, right? So it integrates with Marketo, it integrates with Salesforce and all that. So the more data we have that we can pull into demand-based, the more that we can refine these journey stages and really kind of truly say, what does engagement mean for GitLab? And what does it mean for an account versus a person as well?
Awesome. Well, I don't know if Sindhu's on the call, but I know that this is something she's also really obsessed with. So if you all aren't already talking about PQLs, I think we'd all love to send you more data.
We have been.
Awesome. Alper had a comment in my question. I want to make sure we don't skip over. It says read only, so I think I'll read it maybe for him, which is, could namespace-based growth adoption metrics be helpful if moved to Salesforce?
Yes. That's actually the exact conversation that Duncan and I had last week. Was we would love to do it. It's a matter of getting the data surfaced so that we can utilize it within demand-based. So that's sort of the next iteration.
Cool. All right, last one for me, and then I'll get off my soapbox. What is our total acquisition cost per SAO in general, and does this get more efficient for account-based SAOs?
I am embarrassed to admit I don't know that off the top of my head right now.
But I do.
I was going to say, Dunk, give me a second. Dunk probably knows. That's why I was going to throw it to Dunk on that one.
Yeah, for small businesses, it's around 2,100 right now, between 1,800 and 2,100. For mid-market, it's in the $3,000 to $5,000 range, and unfortunately for large, it's still in about the $12,000, $13,000 range. But improving our MQL to SAO conversion will dramatically reduce that because it's just the math of how many we convert that reduces the cost.
And just a question on that cost, is that just our program spend for paid, or is that also including kind of our all-in cost for generating the inbound inquiries?
Excellent question. That is our program cost for paid, but it doesn't include like people costs, things like that. It doesn't include SDR cost. Okay.
Thank you. I'll hand it off to Christopher.
Hey, can I ask a follow-up question to that, for Dunk, real quick? We have a lot of duplicates in our system. Does that end up messing up that number as well? Like if we're counting a greater number of MQLs, but a lot of those MQLs are duplicates?
No, because that's accommodated in the touchpoint model.
Okay.
So I don't think that would inflate the cost at all.
Got it. Okay.
In theory, Danielle, from the efficiency question, is in theory, this is more impactful to sort of what I'll call our outbound motion. And it should actually increase efficiency because we'll be focused on the right accounts at the right time. So we'll see, TBD.
Oh.
All right, Chris Wang, I think you are next.
Yeah, so this is a question about database fatigue on slide 4. It was one of the things that we thought about for potential reasons for conversion rate. Just wondering if we made any iterations on that, how we're thinking about that, and if we have something new in place there.
So I'll answer from my perspective, and Dunk can answer from his perspective because I think it's two different approaches, right? So my concern, especially as we went all virtual with field marketing last year, is that we were utilizing the same list over and over and over for the events that we were doing, right? It was no longer, we did do regional based activities, but it was no longer just regional based activities, right? So you could be hitting the same database over and over and over from a marketing perspective. We've grown the database. There's no question about that, right? Dunk's team's done a great job with the MQL side of things. My fear is, SDRs are hitting the same people over and over. My fear is field marketing could be hitting the same people over and over and over. So one of the adjustments we're making where we're triggering workflows with the audiences for accounts with less than 5 people that are engaged is to actually go in and drive unknowns, find new prospects, and push them into the top of the funnel so that Duncan teams, so the field marketing, so the number of folks can get them into the marketing stream and work towards MQLing them. So it's sort of a brute force approach to growing our database, but I think it's an informed approach that could help us continue to add to those numbers. Dunk, I don't know if you want to comment on anything additional to that.
No, Chris, it's a great observation. One of the things that we want to do is within the marketing ops team and the campaigns team is a joint initiative around basically customer lifecycle marketing and looking at all the different digital touch points and making sure that we're not oversaturating the prospects. And that comes from all sources. That can come in from LinkedIn campaigns that are run in LinkedIn. It's not really our database. It can come from display ads. So also working with Sam and Gila and the product growth team, because we want to also overlay into that what's happening on the PQL side and the nurtures that are coming out of Mailgun. So it is a real risk, and it's a great observation on that. It's something that we've been thinking about and talking about, and we're going to start spinning up some issues around that. Unfortunately, the person that we were going to have lead that left the organization. So we've got to backfill that person, and then we'll spin it back up again.
Yeah, I wonder if other businesses have some sort of decay model where someone comes in top of the funnel, therefore we give them a higher weight, and as they basically become stale, then the weight decreases, and then that way we're not that help out with conversion rates. I'm wondering what other businesses do.
Yeah, so that's in our lead scoring model.
Okay. I already have it. Gotcha.
Yeah, there already is. That's in the lead scoring model. But what I will tell you is one of the things that's become extremely effective for us is our email nurture programs over the last quarter. And what that showed is it continued to validate our fundamental hypothesis relative to our ICP, that we have developers that are research and investigating GitLab well in advance of having a project or a budget. So we were able to go back and successfully re-nurture people that have been in the nurture queue from a year ago, 6 months ago, et cetera, just by having a structured long path nurture that is providing valuable information to them and getting them to engage. So it drove about 60% of our SAOs and over 60% of our MQLs in the first quarter of this year came from those long path nurtures. So what that showed to me is we don't really have database fatigue, but there's always a risk that we could if we did too much of it, if you get my gist.
That's awesome. Thank you. That's actually really high. I'm surprised that it's that much too. Yeah,
Cool.
I think I got the next one too.
Yeah.
Evan, this is a question that it's pretty generic. So on slides 9 through 11, we talked about the associate SDR team, interested in learning more about that and basically how that will work.
Yep. So you'll be heavily involved in this because they're going to be doing Tanuki Tech, Chris. So the associate SDR team, think of it as a SDR in waiting, right? So one of the things that we've seen pick up over the last, I'd say quarter and a half, is the movement from SDR to the sales organization or other parts of GitLab, which is great, right? It's career progression. We want to see people move and elevate their careers. So we support it wholeheartedly. What it does, and what we learned very quickly, we lost a bunch at the beginning of the year. It leaves gaps in capacity and gaps in production. So we've created the associate SDR program as a in-house backfill to a certain extent. And it actually gives us the ability to open up our hiring processes a little bit more and be a little bit more open and inclusive to folks with various backgrounds, right? So historically, we've hired SDRs with SDR experience. We've since changed our hiring profile. We've opened that up and are more receptive to what I would say transferable skill sets. This gives us that ability to do that, teaches them, hey, this is the way of the SDR. This is how we SDR at GitLab. They go through Tanuki Tech. They do the product training with you. They will be basically doing some SDR motions like lead list building, account research, and then feeding those lead lists out to the SDRs who are aligned to the accounts in preparation for a opening on the SDR team and a movement into full-blown SDR as opposed to associate SDR. So it's almost like a redundancy program for us, where if someone were to get promoted or move on, we actually can backfill them quite quickly with someone who's already doing a portion of the motion.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Cool. I have the next one. So in an effort to not blur the lines between sales marketing, as we're always trying to do that, right? Make sure we work together, not against. How do you see the delineation of the SDR versus AE on how we use demand-based together? We've been playing around with it a little bit. I'll say a note after you answer, but I think this is probably in reference to slide 11, but.
Yep. So I look at it as a way to actually enhance collaboration between the teams, right? So the way AEs should be thinking about their territories is they should have a territory plan. Who are their top accounts? Who should they be targeting? But they should be using data to inform them as well on where we should be focusing. I see it as a way to create clean lines and say, you focus here, we're going to focus here, right? Whether it's account rank or a particular execution of let's go outbound with X, Y, and Z messaging here, here, and here. So I see it as a way to inform each other of what's happening in your region, because you're all going to have your own audiences with accounts, and you're going to be able to look at your territories and see what accounts are progressing through the funnel and then take informed activities. So I see it as a way to plan between AE and SDR and create a territory strategy and a territory plan to execute over the course of the quarter. Right. And I'll give you an anecdotal example. When I was an AE several years ago, we used to do weekly touch bases, and we would switch from net new to growth halfway through the quarter based off of where we were having success and where we were getting traction within the accounts. I could see that being not necessarily for your group because you're all net new, but I could see that being a focal point of where do we pivot our strategy based off of what we're seeing from an engagement perspective in demand base.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, we were playing around with it. We've had some targeted outreach. Lisa Vandekoy and Johan, give them a quick shout out, but they were able to really, really quickly get into accounts that were in the middle of evaluating GitLab versus GitHub plus Azure DevOps, which traditionally, if we would, we wouldn't know that they were evaluating them. We get to them too late. They'd already have made a decision without our input. And so we're able to get to them and help them along that journey, which is insanely good. So already a fan, but willing to learn more.
And they haven't even been trained on it yet, which
I
means
know.
it'll only get better when they have their audiences and are enabled. SDRs are actually being enabled in
Today, right?
Yeah, today. And then Emily, what's the timeline? I think is it next month for sales?
Yeah, we're hoping to do it next month for sales. Just to give a little bit of additional color on how like demand-based can work with that collaboration is there are keyword sets in there, and there's actually one that is solely based for competitive intent. So you can actually track if they're starting to evaluate GitLab. So if you're starting to see that trend, and if they're starting to trend, like they're also looking at Jenkins or something along those lines, and you can set it up to where it's automated. So the SDR and the AE can actually get a subscription of all of the accounts that you're assigned in Salesforce, and see that snapshot weekly. So it will inform you versus you having to go into the system and find it.
It's first order gold. It's awesome.
Cool. All right. Sam, I think you have the next one.
Yeah, on slide 13, I didn't see any strategies listed to freemium product adoption or trials. So I'm curious how those are leveraged today, and how that could potentially be improved in the future. Like what information are you desperate for that you don't have from the product?
Yeah. So trials are, I would say, one of the highest priorities from an SDR perspective as it relates to response, right? That is one of our best indicators for a conversation. So building a strategy around it, I wouldn't say we necessarily have a strategy around trials versus we're going to use trials as ways to engage and drive folks into the funnel, right? So I think when you look at prospecting or outbounding in open core, open source, it's more difficult than say a standard product, right? You're talking about increasing adoption. The best thing we can do, I'm going to steal from Ryan O'Neill, who I think is no longer on the call, is actually get the product in people's hands and get them using the product, right? So part of this is how do we educate, right? Using things like GitLab Learn, a lot of the content we have on our website, driving to Path Factory paths, getting engagement that way. And then part of this is getting people to use, right? And getting adoption. So one of the things I did call out in, I think it's slide 11, was driving folks to trial, but we have to make sure we're driving them to trial at the right time. So that's the part we need to figure out, and we're going to have to test with. As far as data that are indicators, TBD, like we don't have usage data, right? So usage and adoption data we're not getting today, and we're not leveraging from an SDR perspective. So I don't know that I have a really solid answer for that. Does anyone else have an opinion? Emily, Leslie, anyone else?
Well, I have an opinion on it. So
Go for it.
yeah. So Sam, you know how important the trials are, right? And also understanding product usage. So as you know, with the dimensional database and the new data warehouse, with the growth teams and our ability to collect intent information relative to group usage, multi-user usage, that's really critical. And so to the extent that we can get that integration to Marketo that we've been talking about, what that'll allow us to do is then do a smart nurture, an email nurture to those users. And with that smart email nurture, we're going to try and get them to self-identify that they're actually a corporate user, even if they register with a Gmail address. So in addition to that, we're also going to try and take all those trialers that give us Gmail addresses and do a match of them inside of LinkedIn, so we can determine which organization that they're associated with. And then we will use the nurture campaigns and programs to drive them to the next best action, which then in turn could be converted to an MQL. And we'll overlay and understand how that works with the focus account list in terms of anybody that's identified that bounces against the list.
Totally makes sense. I love it. And just, I actually have an open issue and I'm actively typing. We do know if their intent is company or team use, and we can get that into the marketing database. So I'll see on that issue today. We just got to prioritize getting that into your database.
And we're waiting for that corporate use data, and we're going to implement that into our lead scoring model as well.
Great.
Right? So that's one of the changes we made with the personal email addresses. If we can capture that personal use, we can actually MQL those personal email addresses faster and put a boost on them. All right, Dunk, we've got 1 minute for your question.
Yeah, I just want to know from you and Emily's perspective, what top of the funnel tactics are going to help you drive better engagement within the focus account list?
I think, we've talked a little bit about this already. I think LinkedIn is going to be a big one for us as we begin to engage these accounts, right, and expand to the 23,000 target list in large. I think engagement from that perspective, LinkedIn has proven to be quite good for us, especially from the SDR perspective when it comes to converting and getting prospects in the funnel. Again, capturing, like we were talking about with the personal data, being able to push it through LinkedIn and have them register and capture their corporate data, I think is very important too, because we're effectively going to be looking for unknowns, right? We're going to be looking for, it may be one person engaging within the account where we're seeing the engagement minutes. It's how do we go and find the rest and then work them through the nurture process. So I think that that's probably the most important. I'm curious as to your perspective on it as well. But that's the one that I think is of the greatest value for us.
I think we're at time.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, everyone. I'll answer the rest of the questions in the doc. Have a great day.